Wolverine is my favourite superhero character of all time, closely followed by Thor. I'd also probably have Homelander in the mix there somewhere too, although I'll admit he's not exactly a hero. Now, Wolverine embodies a character of rage, strength and resilience, but underneath that adamantium skeleton of his and his healing factor lies a man who has endured more pain than any of us could ever imagine. Today I would like to talk about not just why Wolverine is my favourite, but also about how his life has been defined by suffering, both physical and emotional. Now, don't worry, there's going to be no spoilers for the newest Deadpool and Wolverine film, although I definitely recommend watching that when you can. Now, I've never really been a comic book guy, and to be honest, I'm not even really that into superheroes in general. However, I've always enjoyed the movies that Wolverine has been in, so that's what most of my knowledge for this video will be based on. Now, Wolverine has always stood out to me, not necessarily because of his powers, but because of this constant theme of perseverance through unimaginable pain and suffering. Now, I find myself drawn to his tenacity, his messy moral code, and his constant struggle against his own nature. He is a character who, for the most part, keeps moving forward, no matter how much it feels like he's drowning, often putting the lives of others far above his own. Now, Wolverine's story starts long before the X-Men were even a thing. In X-Men Origins, we see a glimpse of his traumatic beginning. Born in the early 1800s as James Howlett, Logan's life was marked by tragedy from a young age. Now, mutants often discover their powers through puberty or through some form of traumatic experience. For Logan, or James, his powers first came to be when he witnessed the murder of his father and took instant revenge, thrusting him straight into a life of pain and conflict from the very beginning, nearly 200 years ago. His early life was then spent with his half-brother, doing seemingly the only thing they really knew how to do: fighting. They fought in countless wars and battles, ranging from the American Civil War, through the two World Wars, and all the way through to the American War in Vietnam. Logan watches his brother fall in love with the violence and cruelty of war, whilst he himself starts to feel conflicted by his part in it. This eventually escalated into an altercation between the two, which accidentally revealed their powers to other soldiers, which they had kept hidden up until now. This is where the two of them were recruited into a unit of other powered individuals by William Stryker. Relations don't exactly get better between the two brothers, and Stryker exploits this by faking the death of Logan's girlfriend and blaming it on Sabretooth, his brother. This leads to one of the most defining moments in Logan's life. He agreed to take part in the Weapon X program. Logan was subjected to extreme, brutal experimentation and pain. His skeleton was bonded with adamantium, making him nearly indestructible. Pain like this isn't just isolated to a physical feeling. This kind of experience also damages you psychologically. Logan's healing factor may have made him be able to physically survive the procedure, but it doesn't do anything to combat the psychological scars, and Logan would suffer from the pain of his experience throughout the rest of his life. Logan was turned into a living weapon, a weapon that would be haunted by PTSD and trauma for the rest of his life. Logan does realise he is being used, and eventually takes revenge upon Stryker and the Weapon X program. He teams up with his brother to defeat someone who we'll pretend wasn't supposed to be Deadpool. However, Logan is eventually shot in the head with an adamantium bullet, leaving him with severe damage to his brain. He heals and survives this injury, but has severe memory loss and is left to live a life not knowing who he really is or even where he's from. Logan then continues life as a drifter, living a lonely life, struggling for answers of who he is and why he's different. In the timeline from the movies, this is where Rogue finds him and he ends up being recruited into the X-Men. For the first time in Logan's living memory, this gives him purpose, but it doesn't erase his pain. Throughout the X-Men movies, we see him struggling with his violent instincts and the burdens of his past. Whether it's him fighting Magneto, battling the Sentinels, or Even just him dealing with the loss of Jean Grey, Logan's life is constantly filled with physical battles and emotional wounds. Now, love comes hand in hand with pain and loss in Logan's life. His relationship with Jean Grey is one of the most tragic aspects of his story. He is in love with Jean, but he can never properly have her, and is forced to spend a life watching her with Scott. This isn't even really the bad bit. In X-Men The Last Stand, when Jean is losing control of her powers, Logan is forced to make a heartbreaking decision to kill her with his own hands. Something about the intimacy of having to thrust your own fist into someone you love to kill them in order to save everyone else really does amplify the pain of this moment. This leaves Logan emotionally shattered, and in the Wolverine we see him grappling with the aftermath of this event. Logan has once again resigned himself to a vagrant lifestyle alone in the woods. He's haunted by visions of Jean and struggles to think of any reason to keep living. But how does an immortal stop living? Logan's powers condemn him to an unwilling life of suffering and grief. I really do love seeing a superhero shown in a way that is just so human like this, struggling with guilt, grief, and loneliness. I'm not really too sure if this movie is even canon, to be honest. If so, then I have no idea how his claws are back in Logan, and I just find the different storylines a little bit confusing with where they overlap and what's real and what isn't, what's canon and what's not. But in the Wolverine, Logan experiences a huge amount of physical pain and is shown in a much more vulnerable light than we'd seen him up until now. Despite his weakened state, he still puts himself at huge risk to save others and protect those that he loves. Now, when it comes to superhero movies, Logan is my favourite of all time. In Logan, we witness a very different Wolverine, one who is older, weaker, and more vulnerable than we have ever seen him before. The once invincible hero who walked through Jean Grey's attacks and survived Rogue's touch has been worn down by time. His healing factor is now failing, his body covered in scars from a lifetime of fighting and sacrifice. On top of these physical struggles, Logan is haunted by the ghosts of his tragic life, in particular the events that led to the deaths of the X-Men. This film does a great job of exploring the impact that his life has had on him, both emotionally and physically. This man has suffered for 200 years, and even he doesn't seem to be capable of withstanding it for too much more. It's a cool way of showing that even the most invincible of heroes cannot escape time. In Logan, we see him push through unimaginable pain to help Laura, a kind of daughter to him. We see him quite literally battling himself and his demons, and pushing himself to the limit to save what could be the next generation of X-Men, and redeeming any mistakes he feels he has made in his life. He gives his everything to save these kids, resulting in his death. His death was done so perfectly though, with him almost joyful to finally feel an end to his long, hard life. Wolverine's life has been a constant battle of physical and emotional pain. His healing factor keeps his body going, but it does nothing for the psychological pain which builds up over time. In the Wolverine, we see Logan grappling with his immortality and the loneliness that comes with it. But by the time we reached Logan, his body is finally failing, but the emotional wounds, like losing Jean Grey and the fellow X-Men, are still haunting him. The duality of pain, both visual and unseen, and Logan's ability to keep pushing forward despite of this, is what makes him such a compelling character to me. Wolverine's life of pain makes him more than just your typical superhero to me. He's a character that shows us that everyone is human, and it's normal to struggle and suffer no matter how powerful you are, but also shows us a story of someone that keeps fighting through this. Even when it feels like the entire world is against him, and he does take a few steps back here and there, he keeps fighting for the people he loves and believes in. I think more people should relate to Wolverine. Even normal human life is full of pain and struggles, but the determination to keep going, no matter what, is something that we should all aspire for. Now, as I'm sure you've noticed, my knowledge is only really based from watching the movies and is very surface level. But whilst thinking through this video, I've realised that I would like to read some of the comics about Wolverine and his origin. So if any of you know the best place to start with that, then please do let me know in the comments below. I'd greatly appreciate it. But that's all I have to say today. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you thought and leave a like if you liked the video. And I'll see you next week.